Hello everyone, this is Dr. Doug Graham here to present a webinar on Culinary Skills Week. Wow your friends with your food. How many times have you just wished you could impress your friends with your food? How many times has your family come over or you gone to them and you just wished, man, if they only understood what I understand, I know I've got to reach out to them with my food and they don't get all that excited when you just peel a banana and eat it. Now, I understand I still get excited to peel a banana, and you might too. But learning how to present brilliant, excellent, delicious, eye-catching, taste bud catching, every sense pleasing food is an art, a science, and a philosophy. Tonight, I'm going to spend a little time helping you learn how to wow your friends with your food, go through some material that I believe is important for everyone in the raw food 80-10-10 camp to fully understand. I'm going to give you some bonus information that we didn't even tell you about just because I like to give you a little extra. And we're going to do everything we can to custom cater this webinar to your needs. And to help us do that, I'd like to offer you a short poll, a question. Tell us why you're here. What's the reason? I'll give you some choices. They're over on the right side of your screen, and you just tick the box. Let me know why you're here. A little later through the seminar or through this webinar, I'll be able to tell you how those numbers panned out so that you know where you stand compared to everybody else and whether Culinary Skills Week is really for you. That's why we're here tonight. Do you want a week full of the type of information that we'll be sharing tonight? So without further ado, please take your poll, let us know, and I will begin customizing the presentation to meet your preferences. One of the biggest issues people have told me about when attempting to learn 80-10-10 from a position of not a lot of experience is that they have no idea how much food to keep in the house. There are a lot of possibilities that affect the answer, but there are some generalities as well. Let's look at what can affect the answer first and how it might, and then we can look at some of the general guidelines. A lot of people say, you know, when I'm home, I find this program really easy, and when I'm on the road, I find it really hard. But just as many people have come to me and said, when I'm on the road, away from my family, I can eat exactly what I want, and I do really great on this program. But when I go home and I have all those other influences of people at my house that aren't eating the way I am, I cave, and I don't do well. I think those people need to meet each other and share their solutions. But at the same time, a lot of people say, you know, I do really well. And then I look around the house and there's nothing to eat. The bananas are still green, and who wants to eat just lettuce? And there's nothing else, and there's no other fruit. And it's winter, and the fruit doesn't taste that good, or it's autumn, and it's not the best time of year, or it's spring, and it's even more gloomy in terms of food availability. what do we have to do to make this work? Well, depending on where you live, the answers are somewhat different. In a rural environment where you might only shop once or twice a week because it's a trip and a trek, you need to have at least 7 to 10 days worth of food. However much food you eat in a day, you need to have at least that much food on hand as a general guideline. Whereas in the city where you might shop every day, there still needs to be some food in the house, but nowhere near as much. 2, 3, 4 days worth of food, 5 days if you want to really be prepared. But usually you can go down to the street every day and pick up a little bit of food and keep the cycle rolling pretty much daily or every other day. And you don't need to have anywhere near as much variety available in your house. The stores can keep the fresh stuff coming, makes it easier for you in terms of greens. Makes it easier for you in terms of greens, and all around, you'll have to see. Now, most people these days live in the city, and they might be able to get away with a bit less food. But still, if you just have today's food in the house, you're going to run out. You're going to run out. It's going to be a problem. Of course, what's in season makes a big difference, and what season it is determines that. To a great degree, sure, you can get mangoes every day of the year if you're willing to pay for them, and you can get autumn fruit in the spring if you're willing to buy it from South America or from Africa. But if you want the freshest and the best of the food, the time of year definitely makes a difference, because there are certain foods, such as persimmon, that you might only see in November and December. Well, it's an interesting thing because persimmon is a food that, how do we say, persimmon is a food that has a tremendously long window of when it's available to you. It's available in terms of once it ripens for weeks. You can take a perfectly ripe persimmon, put it in your fridge, come back a month later, and it will still be good. It'll still be excellent, maybe even better than it was when you first thought it was ripe. Whereas there's lots of food where you only get a few days. If it's persimmon season and I want the persimmon availability to last, I could have 20 trays of persimmon in my house and spread those out over the next 3 months. I've done the same thing with tomatoes at the end of tomato season, where I'll have 8 weeks worth of tomatoes in my house, and as they come ripe, I keep them in a relatively cool place. I control the ripening process a little bit, slow it down as much as I can without having them go bad or lose flavor. And that, it throws the whole average off when we say, oh, you only need 3 days worth of food in the house. Well, here I've got the next 3 months worth of food in the house in terms of tomatoes and persimmon. With greens, I only want as short an amount as possible. I want to keep getting fresh greens. And so we want to look. Apples keep a long time. Pears keep an incredibly long time. And with each food, we're going to have to choose how we go about how much of it is in the house. Some foods ripen up very slowly, and you never want to run out. Say, bananas. I always have a week's worth of bananas in the house, sometimes 10 or 12 days worth of bananas in my house, and that's a lot of bananas. But unless I do, I'm just as likely to run out of ripe bananas, a situation I don't want to have happen. as I am to be able to meter it just closely enough. So the seasons and what's in season makes a difference in your choices of how much food you're going to keep in your house. Of course, space is an issue. Your ability to store the food and how long it will store. You can find out how to store food by asking your produce manager. He'll probably or she'll probably tell you pretty clearly, well, these are the instructions we've got for this, that, or the next food. And we know we can keep apples at a certain temperature for a long time, and you can keep bananas. I mean, you can keep apples colder than you keep tomatoes, and they'll be just happy as could be. Whereas tomatoes you can keep them a long time if you keep them cold, but they lose their flavor. Who wants that? And so it might be a good idea, if you have the possibility, to have more than one place where you store your food. Maybe one place is very cool and one place is fairly warm. And you can change it up as you need be. As I mentioned already, with greens, I want them as fresh as I can possibly get them. I want to keep them fresh and make them happen. I want the turnover to be a lot of turnover. I don't want to buy a week's worth of greens that they just won't keep for a week. They won't have that same flavor. And so I might make an extra trip to the store. I'd certainly be willing to make an extra trip to the store to just go get some more greens rather than try to buy a lot all at once. So individual foods, you're going to have to choose which and how much do you want to have in the house. But I'll tell you what, you're better off to have too much than you are to have too little. If you have too little, you bump into problems. You can predict problems. Whereas if you have too much, well, you could eat a little more of whatever you have too much of. You could invite some friends over to help you eat the food, especially if you can make it into something that will wow them. You could freeze it if it's a freezable product, or dry it if it's a dryable product. If it has to, it makes really good compost. And so there are so many different ways to deal with too much. But too little, you have too little and you bumped into a problem. And so we don't want that to happen. We're going to keep plenty of food coming your way. Keep plenty of food in the house. You're better off with too much than you are with too little. Now tonight I promised to talk to you a bit about my favorite kitchen tools, and I want to get right into that for you. And maybe there's no surprise. I promised my 5 favorite kitchen tools. I made a list of at least 5, and I'm sure you'll... Don't count, okay? Don't count. If you ask me my favorite 5 fruits, I can put 10 or 15 into that list too, but I'll tell you the tool that I use a lot. It's called the Julien peeler. Now, what the Julien peeler does, it usually either has little teeth or little holes. There's several different styles of Julien peelers, and what they affect is the shape of what they peel. You might get square shape if you have little teeth. You'll get circles, and depending on the texture, the size of the openings will determine the size of what you end up getting. So for a Julien peeler, there are many different kinds of those. The type I like is just a little handheld peeler. It's not the same as a cucumber peeler, just a straight slice. What it does is it ends up making something that looks like noodles. I'm a real fan of noodles, so I might use a Julien peeler on my cucumber to make cucumber skin noodles or cucumber noodles. Now, I like cucumber skin noodles. I make soups with cucumber skin. I make sandwiches with cucumber skin. I put them sometimes in the salad as an extra texture within the salad, and it's just cucumber skin cut in noodles. It's fascinating. And most people are surprised to find out how good the skins are, the part that they would usually just throw away. Now, I like the skins, and they make a good dish all by themselves. And of course, the cucumber itself is excellent. You can julienne peel harder vegetables, such as a butternut squash or even a pumpkin, to make noodles that are quite delicious. So there's lots of ways to use the julienne peeler, and it's definitely one of my favorite tools. I like that it's so portable and quiet. I can use it whenever I travel. I'm a fan of the Vitamix blender. I highly recommend the Vitamix blender. If you have to choose which blender you're going to buy next, I recommend the Vitamix blender. And if you ever want to say that I sent you to buy your Vitamix blender, you get a special price. That's cool too. But I am a fan of Vitamix blender, and I've tried most of the different blenders that are out on the market. I used to buy cheap blenders. I'd buy a $20 blender, knowing full well that if it broke down, I could bring it back to the store. One day, I brought 4 blenders back. I had one, broke it, broke the next when I got the return, broke the next. On the 4th one, I felt a little funny, but I still brought it back. But I didn't buy another one. I said, I wonder what would happen if I spend a little more money and just buy one. Why do I have to keep going through blenders that don't work? I bought my Vitamix. Gosh, 30 years ago. It's still cranking. And I've tested it now and then. I've worked it pretty hard, and it's still just going strong. I own several Vitamix blenders now, and I stand by them firmly. I've bought a lot of the other very expensive blenders and have found for various reasons that I didn't like them as well as just the... I think the Vitamix is the standard by which all other blenders are measured. For me, the Vitamix is great. Now, I like to put things in the Vitamix in order to start with frozen things and make something close to the texture of ice cream. I mean, it is very creamy if you start with bananas, but if you start with mangoes or peaches, you're going to come up with something that is more of a sorbet. It's an icier texture. I enjoy putting vegetables in the blender and leaving the blender on high for a whole minute until it warms up close to body temperature, at which point I can have a warm soup and enjoy that very much. I take the Vitamix, and sometimes the food piles up on itself, it gets wedged, it gets lodged, and yes, there's a pushing tool that you can use to help. But sometimes I have to just take the Vitamix off of its stand, off its base, and tap the bottom of it onto the tabletop. Bang, bang, bang. Put it back on, everything's fallen in, you put it back on. The Vitamix blender pulls air down, and we'll talk about other blenders that don't do that a little later on, because although it's incredibly efficient at blending, the Vitamix blender definitely pulls air into your food, and it aerates it, which means that some of the oxygen-sensitive nutrients are affected. Now, if you eat the food right away, we're really not talking about any issue at all, because even chewing has that same effect. But If you leave the food for 8 hours or 24 hours, that oxidizing factor makes the food just a little bit less nutritious, and depending on the food, can really be a negative feature, which is another reason that I'm always recommending that we eat fresh food. I don't even know how many different kinds of food processors there are out on the market. Most of the good ones are really excellent. I like many of the attachment blades, and I use a lot of different blades on my food processor. Yes, I like the Julien blade, but I also use the S blade a tremendous amount. I use the S blade to make sauces. I use the S blade to make crushed vegetables. Take celery or carrot and put it on the S blade, lettuce on the S blade, cauliflower on the S blade, and you end up with really small little bits. You can control how big, from grain of sand to grain of rice size. And depending on the texture that you're hoping to present in the food that you're making, you can control this so that it'll come out the way you want. There are many different blades. The food processor is exactly the way it sounds, right? It allows you to process food at high speed with a lot less effort, a lot less mess, and certainly a lot less time than you could ever do it with a knife. Now, if you're good with a knife, one of my favorite tools, a good knife. I use my knife every day for a lot of things. You can turn it, the blade on its side, put a walnut or a macadamia nut under it, tap your fist on top of the flat blade, and you end up with crushed nuts. If you keep your knife sharp, you can cut with great precision. I'm maybe a little over the top with this, but if it's the first time of the day that I'm using a knife, I sharpen it. I sharpen it every day, and at that point it only takes 2 or 3 strokes, either with a sharpening tool such as you're looking at here, or with a sharpening tool that does both edges at the same time, and 2 or 3 strokes, it's sharp, and noticeably different than if I don't take those 2 or 3 strokes. The idea with a knife is to be able to handle a knife that you can control, that you feel comfortable with. A bigger knife isn't better if you can't control it, if you don't feel that you're totally at ease wielding such a big blade. But generally, a bigger blade is better if you can handle it. There's a lot of different kinds of knives out there. You want to have a sharp knife. It'd be nice to have a knife that keeps its edge. Is a ceramic knife automatically better than a metallic knife? No, not at all. There are quality ceramic knives and there are low-cost ceramic knives, and just because it's ceramic does not make it better. The citrus juicer is a tool that I use almost every day. Now, I juice my citrus. A lot of the pulp falls into the juice, so I'm fine with that. If there's excess pulp up on top, I eat that or add it to a salad dressing or put it into some other recipe. We end up eating the whole food, the edible portion. But I like to juice my citrus because I then use that citrus juice in an endless number of recipes, from salad dressings where it's just the best citrus juice, to drinking it plain, to blending it with mango or blending it with peach. Today the donut peaches were just spectacular blended with orange juice. Just those two ingredients, blend, drink, done. I had close to a gallon. Do I use a citrus juicer in any way that's particularly odd or unusual? Well, not really. I don't think so. I don't use it as a massage tool or anything, although you could. But I certainly put lemon, lime, orange, grapefruit, tangerine. Tangerine juice is just spectacular. And occasionally, you can use the citrus juicer on other types of fruit. If you wish, for instance, if you slice a tomato in half and then put it on top of the citrus juicer, you can control how much of the middle of the tomato you take out and how much you leave. For instance, if you wish to make stuffed tomatoes, it's an easy way to do it. I'm particularly fond of an immersion blender because it doesn't create the cavitation, that downflux of air into the food you're drinking. So it doesn't oxidize the food, and it doesn't leave it full of air if you don't want it full of air. Sometimes there's things that you want to make lighter and fluffier. Sometimes you don't. A lot of people find that that inclusion of air, for instance, if you take bananas and water and blend them, that including the air affects the flavor just a little bit. If you take the same amount of water and the same amount of bananas and use an immersion blender, sometimes referred to as a stick blender or a wand, they find that the flavor is actually different. But what's even more noticeable is that if you take a glass of each, Vitamix blend bananas and water, Immersion blend bananas and water, same quantities of both, pour them both into a cup, and then, or a clear glass, and check them again in 30 minutes, and check them again in an hour. The Immersion blender drink will be basically the same color as it was when you started. The Vitamix will have gone very dark, like an apple does after you cut it. This is oxidative damage. It's a small but measurable loss of nutrients. I'm using the immersion blender for the texture that I can create and not really worrying so much about nutrition. I'm eating a diet of whole, fresh, ripe, organic foods. I'm not worrying that much about nutrition. The nice thing about immersion blenders is they come in different sizes. At our events, we have an immersion blender large enough so that we can blend 10 gallons of soup all at one time. And it does a great job on 10 gallons. That's a big pot. There are even bigger ones than that, and smaller ones in gradations all the way down to a little handheld stick blender home unit. Whatever you get, it's well worth trying the immersion blender because it will do quantities that are essentially too small for a powerful blender like a Vitamix to even bother with. I mean, you put in small quantities and it ends up below the blades. You can't even do it in a Vitamix, and yet in an immersion blender you certainly can. I like playing with my food and I like presenting it in different ways, and so I enjoy using mold. There's a tremendous number of kinds of molds, from cookie cutters to these what are sometimes referred to as a burger press. There are all sorts of molds available, and I think one of the things I like about a mold, especially a pressable mold, is that I can put the food in the mold and then squeeze as hard or as gently as I want. If there's excess moisture, I mean, I was doing vegetables the other day in a mold that makes 5 at a time, little cylinders, short cylinders, about 1.5 inches tall and 1 inch across, and it makes 5 at a time. Well, I can put the vegetables in and make those 5 cylinders and serve them as little, I call them tots, but I can serve those tots. And if I don't squeeze very hard, they certainly take the shape of the mold, but it's a very wet product. If I squeeze seriously, then I can drive the water out. It'll all fall out. I have a bowl underneath and let all the liquid fall into that bowl. And then I have cylinders that are, in fact, quite dry, about the way I want them. If I want them dry, wet if I want them wet. And I end up with an extra course because I can end up with all that vegetable juice that I've hand squoze out of the vegetables and either use that in a different dish or serve it as its own course. Lots of things you can do with mold. And I think one of the most powerful is the fact that you can create symmetry, whether that's for your salad or a slaw served in a symmetrical mold, or just the fact that if you're serving 100 of them, that they can all look identical. And when you're plating up 100 of something, it's rather nice to see them all look the same. It's really pleasing. It gives the consumer an excellent feeling. I've tried every kind of dehydrator on the market, from solar dehydrator cylinders and angled tubes to stackable dehydrators and circular ones. They all have some good things about them, but none of them can touch the Excalibur dehydrator. Excalibur dehydrator just does the job. It's really brilliant. You can control the temperature. You can have a timer if you want things to go off or not if you don't. And you can control the dehydration from just a few minutes of sweating a product to half an hour to an hour of wilting it a bit. It's very nice to wilt lettuce if that's the texture you want. To heightening the flavor of various fruits or vegetables by leaving them in the dehydrator for 2 or 3 hours. If you want to make full-on dehydrated food, you can. I almost never do that. But I do use my dehydrator as a kitchen tool for making tonight's dinner, and I might not start it until 2 in the afternoon and then put it in the dehydrator for 2 or 3 hours, and it's just enough moisture driven off that the flavor is heightened, the texture is changed. It's a fun tool to play with, and certainly well within 80-10-10 parameters. I like the flexible cutting mat because it's quiet when you cut on it, because it's easy to clean in the sink, and because once I've chopped up whatever I'm chopping, I can curl the mat and walk with it easily, even if I just wish to dump it into a Vitamix or into a food processor. By curling the cutting mat, all the food comes out in a controlled fashion rather than tipping a wooden board or a glass board or a plastic board that it's really hard to get the food off. So I enjoy having flexible cutting mats. Plus they travel so easily and lightly. I just think they're way cool. Here's a winner, the Mandolin. If you've never used a Mandolin, please let me warn you that not only are they a lot of fun, but pretty much anybody who uses a Mandolin more than once is likely to cut themselves. Be careful. You're sliding food across a razor's edge. There are different razor edges on the mandolin, some of them curved and some of them flat, but you're sliding it past a razor edge. You can make waffle cut vegetables, you can make noodles, you can make controlled every slice exactly the same at any width you wish. You can reproduce the same ones a month later, getting the exact same cuts. It's a marvelous tool. It's easy to use. It's easy to clean. I think I have 3 or 4 different mandolins in my house, and I actually use different ones for different jobs. I love making noodles with my mandolin, but I also greatly enjoy making even thickness slices of, say, a zucchini that I can then put a sauce on top and serve it up as finger food. How much? Well, a lot of people do weigh their food before every meal, and unless you have medical reasons to do that, I'm not a big fan of it. But if you want to create a recipe that you can reproduce later on, you almost have to weigh the food. Just saying one banana, I mean, there's little bananas, there's big bananas. One apple, one strawberry, it's, well, I guess it depends on how precise you want to be. But if you want to add, say, 25 grams or 28 grams of sunflower seeds into a recipe, so that you know exactly how much fat, carbohydrate, and protein you're putting into your food in order to create recipes that, one, you can reproduce, and two, other people can reproduce. The kitchen scale, a great tool. So if you think about it, my top 5 tools include the food scale, the mandolin, the flexible cutting mats, Excalibur, Dehydrator, molds, Immersion blender, citrus juicer, large knife, food processor, and a Vitamix blender along with your Julien peeler. That should keep you going for a while. We're here tonight to talk about Culinary Skills Week, and where do you need to improve your culinary skills? I don't know. Maybe you just want to have a better understanding of food combining so that you get the most nutrition because you got the best digestion. Maybe you want to learn a lot more about food ripening and food storage, which foods store cold, which foods store warm, how long, when are they ripe, what do I have to do to prevent fruit flies. Maybe you want to expand your recipe repertoire and learn dozens and dozens, hundreds of new recipes are demonstrated or talked about at Culinary Skills Week. If you're interested to create desirable dishes, you know, you come home and you find out what's in the house and that's what's available, and can you make dinner with this? Well, yeah, sure. Or do you say, no, I can't, I have to go shopping first? It'd be nice to be able to just say, okay, here's what you get, now make it into a meal. And we show you how to do that. We show you how to make custom meal plans for various types of athletes, for people in different types of ill health, for special needs, geriatric, pediatric, no teeth, whatever it might be, or even for people who have taste preferences or allergies. We want to show you how to make custom meals and still stay within the 80-10-10 parameters for all of that, while being able to explain to the people for whom you made the food why you're making it the way you're making it. Of course, if you just want to broaden your kitchen skills, come to Culinary Skills Week. I mean, you'll spend a lot of time in the kitchen with our best 80-10-10 trained food and sports chefs, the ones that do our events year in and year out, and they're there to share their information with you. So, we took a poll. Hopefully all of you played and gave us a little bit of a response on the poll. and I've addressed those needs specifically. Kevin, are you out there? Can you tell us how the poll went tonight?
Certainly, Dr. Graham. The number one response was expanding my recipe repertoire. Coming in second, there's a tie for second, with understanding food combining and possessing a knowledge of best food ripening and storage methods.
People are really describing Culinary Skills Week to the nth degree. We're going to everyone gets a chance to make food at Culinary Skills Week. And so you get to see not only your own practice improve, but you get to watch everyone else at Culinary Skills Week making food. And so a tremendous number of recipes are brought to light using the same foods. Then we get to work in teams. You get practice leading the team, you get practice being part of the team, and depending on where your skill set falls best, again, making recipes that other people dictate. And it's just, by the time you go home, you are a changed person in the kitchen. You literally become kitchen magician. What happens at Culinary Skills Week? We build a range of enticing dishes, from fast and simple to time-consuming and complex. And you get practice in the classroom figuring out how is that going to happen. Then in the kitchen, actually making it happen. We're going to gain command of the 80-10-10 lifestyle in a comfortable, supportive environment where we take you through classes to make sure with our immersion techniques that you live the part every day. At Culinary Skills Week, we teach you how to make food management, quality control, quantity control, portion control, and food combinations as automatic as breathing in and out by covering it in the classroom and then going into the kitchen and doing those exact same things a second time. We cover the theory, we cover the practical, and by the time you've done it every day for a week, it's automatic. We're going to teach you to tantalize your friends and family with simply delicious 80-10-10 raw vegan dishes that are tried and true, tested to perform well. We're going to show you the ones that we know always work and give you those to take home. We're going to teach you how to understand the art of ambiance. You will be doing the ambiance, but we have professional help there as well. The importance of plating and how to make that heighten and enhance the quality of the food you serve. And other key ingredients in presentation so that your food comes across as good as it possibly can. There doesn't need to be any downsides. We're going to teach you how to use a dehydrator to heighten flavors and to broaden your scope of textures. And again, in the classroom, describe what happens so that you have a working knowledge, and then do it in the kitchen. We have a wall of dehydrators to use and practice with so you can see what happens and do the experiments and then work with it that way. You'll gain confidence that you can prepare healthy, tasty meals, that you can please your guests, no matter who they are, even if they're family, and even if they're not well. You can be sure that you're making food that will fit their special dietary requirements. If you're looking for new recipes, come to Culinary Skills Week. If you want new cuisine ideas, how to make Oriental food, how to make Middle Eastern food, how to make food of different ethnic cultures, if you want more ideas to do with food, how to carry themes through your food, come to Culinary Skills Week. If you want to make your food beautiful and just absolutely rich with flavor, learning which different foods hide each other and which ones augment each other's tastes, Culinary Skills Week. If you want to know how to make sure you always have the right amount of ripe produce in your house, we're going to practice and do it at Culinary Skills Week. And of course, if just overall you want to take a quantum leap in your ability to produce fantastic 80-10-10 gourmet food, come to Culinary Skills Week. Our retreat center is in Sedro-Woolley, Washington, just north of Seattle. It's a beautiful place in a beautiful setting with all the facilities that we need, a huge open kitchen. We've got new building going up this year just to make sure that even if the weather is horrendous, of course we're going in September, it's the best weather of the year traditionally, but we're ready for anything. We built a new building this year just to make sure that we can work with people in the small groups that we really want to, while we're accepting only a few people into each retreat. 16 is the absolute max for Culinary Skills Week. We'll have at least half of that many there working to assist you in making sure that you get the custom hand holding that you really need. But we can go walk in the woods, we can go swim in the river, we can take a hike up a mountain. It's all right there. We have really nice, cush, comfortable living room, couldn't be more home style. Bedrooms couldn't be more plush. We want you to feel well taken care of. Of course, we're going to make food, and we're going to make the food look pretty, taste fantastic, appeal to all of your senses, and we'll show you the tricks that make that easy for you. Ah, falafel. Banana pie? I mean, these foods are not served every day in most 80-10-10 homes, but they can be if you enjoy making food for your family. If you just want to throw them an apple and say eat it, fine. But if you want to make nice things for a party, for a group at work, for just entertaining in any way, for an event, maybe for a seminar, maybe for a living, come to Culinary Skills Week. We'll teach you how to make food that will astonish your friends and please everyone who tries it. We'll show you what it takes to make the food irresistible. A lot of people think they can resist whole, fresh, ripe, raw, organic fruits and vegetables, but not when you make it look and taste appealing. Alicia Ojeda is a classically trained chef with a breadth and depth of experience more than 20 years, and don't even say probably. Alicia Ojeda has more chef experience than any raw foods chef in the world. The girl is astonishing. She's got eyes behind her head. She knows everything that's going on in her kitchen. Her managerial skills are second to none. She's worked in situations where she was making breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 14,000 people at each meal every day. Chef Katie Crane, has been our head chef at various food and sport events, including the fasting in Costa Rica, where she's making food for 10 for the first 4 weeks and for 30 for the last couple of weeks. Our walking tour in Costa Rica, and she's co-authoring with me our Simply Delicious recipe book series. The ebooks are out already, and if you haven't seen the 80-10-10 Simply Delicious ebooks, please check them out. Culinary Skills Week schedule is pretty simple. There's theory in the classroom every day. There's practical in the kitchen every day. We start out with a lot of theory and a little practical. We finish with a little theory and a lot of practical. As your skills improve and the amount that you're willing to take on in the kitchen grows. From definitions in food combining, caloronutrients to food storage, on through meal planning and special needs and problem solving, we cover everything in a week of lecture material. Go over into the kitchen and put those exact things into practice so you learn to see the kitchen like a pro chef does and handle the produce like a pro chef does. Get a little practice under your belt making a dinner, and then finally learn and develop not only your teamwork skills but your leadership skills in the kitchen to make massive meals as a group. It's a lot of fun, it's a lot of work, and it's a tremendous amount of personal growth in the area of culinary skills. It's quickly becoming the most popular of all the food and sports Cedro Woolley events. Culinary Skills Week has so many people talking about it, so many people wanting to attend. You go home with a repertoire of new recipes and 80-10-10 cuisine concepts. New kitchen skills from every angle, things you never would have even thought. An appreciation and understanding of how to create awe-inspiring ambiance, which may be a part of being a kitchen magician that you had never even considered. It certainly affects you whether the room is orange and blue or gray and red, and what type of music is playing in the background. If you want to master your food combining principles and learn how to construct custom meals, Culinary Skills Week, you'll go home with all of that plus so much more. The event itself is $36.97 for 7 full days, 8 nights at Culinary Skills Week. If you're interested, reserve your spot at foodandsport.com/retreats. If you reserve your spot now, we offer special deals, goodies. We'll only have 16 spots available in total. We've already got people registered, but there are still spots open. If you're interested to come to Culinary Skills Week, register right away. We offer special packages. At the end of the day, if you attend an 80-10-10 event, it will change your life in ways you never imagined. The safety alone at our retreats, the acceptance, the feeling of family can't be beat. Just being a week when nobody asks you where do you get your protein is worth it, but so much more will happen than that. We share everything we know in order to help you succeed at reaching your personal goals. Find a way to make it happen. Come to Culinary Skills Week. I promise you won't regret it. And I can tell you this for a fact. Over the decades that I've been running retreats, I've had Hundreds of people tell me, I can't come this year, but I'll come next year. So far, not one of those people has ever come to a food and sport event. If you're interested, make it happen this year. We'll help you. We'll help you figure out a payment plan or give you ideas of how to raise the funds. We want you to be there. We want you to join the food and sport family. I look forward to seeing you at Culinary Skills Week or any of the other Cedro Woolley events this September and October. Put it on your schedule. Make it happen. Come to health. I'm still doing this Saturday a webinar on Health and Fitness Week. We'll talk the educational portion, how much training is too much training. And then later on Saturday, Culinary Skills Professionals, a 2-week program being taught this year for the very first time. And the education there, are you ready to be an executive chef at a festival? How do you plan the food for a large-scale event? I hope I see you at future webinars and, of course, at food and sport events. We want you to join the family so that it's better for all of us. Reserve your spots at foodandsport.com/retreats. And I'm sure that many of you have asked questions during the course of this webinar. So Kevin, if you'd like to come back and share with me some of the questions, I'll be glad to answer to the best of my ability.
All right. I think we'll start with a relatively easy couple. This first comes from Ree Sprinkle, and she's wondering, what is the best food processor? Is there a specific brand that you're a favorite of? I know I've seen you using the Cuisinart.
I don't think there is a best food processor, to be honest. Different food processors offer different options. Some have a lot of attachments, such as a citrus juicer or a blender attachment. Some offer different size containers. Some offer containers that empty themselves as you fill them. I think the trick is really buying a quality food processor so that you're not cursing over the way it functions or the way it lasts. You're likely going to have to spend more than $100 to get a quality food processor, but I don't think it really matters which one. Black & Decker makes really good food processors, and Kenwood makes great food processors. Of course, Cuisinart makes good food processors, and many other companies make great food processors. We use several different food processors in our kitchen at Food and Sport so that you can see how the different ones work in Culinary Skills Week.
Thank you. This next question comes from Shalea, and she'd like to know how to reduce fruit flies.
Don't feed them so much and they get thinner. How do we reduce fruit flies? You mean like not have them in your house? I think the understanding that most people lack in terms of fruit flies is that fruit flies are not interested in fruit. If you go to an apple orchard, you don't find fruit flies. If you go to a grocery store, you don't find fruit flies. If you go to most quality fruit markets or fruit stands, even open air ones, you don't find fruit flies. Fruit flies are attracted to food that is going bad. They're attracted to fruit that is going off. It's either been damaged, broken, crushed, rotting. Something is wrong with it. It's getting old. The sugars are being converted into alcohols and then into vinegars. And this attracts fruit flies. So the trick really to not having fruit flies in your house is staying on top of the quality control of your food. As long as the quality, I mean, if you see fruit flies in your house, you got to find the culprit. Something is attracting them, and it's not your fruit. It's a piece of fruit that has a bit of damage in it. It's a piece of fruit that's gotten old and hidden somewhere. It's something dripped somewhere and you didn't know about it. It's an old tomato that's going bad. It's not quality fresh produce that you would eat. The food that attracts a fruit fly is food that you would not eat. So keep on top of your quality control. You won't have fruit flies in your house. Get your compost out of your house regularly, and you won't have fruit flies in your house. But if you do have fruit flies in your house, you have various issues to consider, from the vegan ethical problem of, is killing a fruit fly anything that you can live with? Uh, some people can't, and then you're going to have to live with fruit flies. The way to get rid of them at that point is to put something that attracts them outside of your house while you get rid of anything that could possibly attract them from inside of your house, and they'll all go out of their own accord. Of course, there's always the vacuum.
Thank you, Dr. Graham. The next question comes from Sunita, and she wants to know, are kale chips dried in the dehydrator within the 80-10-10 guidelines?
80-10-10 is a caloronutrient ratio. But 80-10-10 lifestyle and food style calls for a predominance of whole, fresh, ripe, raw, organic plants, organic fruits and vegetables. Kale chips fit all those parameters except for being whole. You start with fresh kale, whole, fresh, ripe, raw, organic kale, and you dehydrate them into chips. Well, if you lived on dehydrated food, you'd become very thirsty indeed. But 80-10-10 is incredibly flexible, and we understand that within the parameters of 80-10-10, there's room not only for exception, but for bending and flexing with nuances. So I would say, if I wish to serve kale chips to a party or at a special event or on occasion to my family, if I wish to serve kale chips, I can't give them fresh kale and say it's the same. I'm going to make kale chips. As far as the ratio of 80-10-10, kale chips fit in just like kale does. As far as, is it fresh? Well, it's been dehydrated for a day. Is it whole? How much does it matter? We're talking about a few calories out of your 2,000 or 3,000 calories per day. Think in terms of the foods that predominate your diet, the foods that you're eating day in and day out, that you're eating the most of. That really wants to be whole, fresh, ripe, raw, organic fruits and vegetables. You always want fresh air too, but sometimes you fly in an airplane. And there's room for that within the guidelines of 80-10-10.
Thank you for the response. We also were wondering during the lecture, or during when you were sharing about your favorite tools, where could we find the mold or the tool for making tater tots?
You probably find the tater tot tool in a good Chinese grocery. They have a lot of molds there, and I like to go into Chinese groceries and see what tools are available. If you want to make other molds, any kitchen supply store will have some kind of molds available. You can also just go online and look at the various molds that are available. Burger molds, there's all kinds of burger presses and burger molds, and there's even the one that we showed the picture of tonight, which is a burger mold that allows you to put a stuffing inside your burger. So uh, there's all kinds out there, and they're in kitchen supply stores or certainly online. They're not hard to come by. You just kind of look around. If you ever want the names of specific items, we're always happy to share that.
Thank you. Sunita also is wondering, do you use a fruit and vegetable wash on your produce?
I don't. I honestly don't. If I'm in the tropics, I might use a little bit of something. We have various options there. But typically, no. I'm either growing my own food and just wiping the dirt off, uh, or sometimes I might peel certain things. I might peel a cucumber depending on the texture that I wish to serve. But I'm not a big fan of vegetable or fruit washes. I'm not convinced that the water that comes out of a tap is cleaner than the food that came out of a store. And occasionally I might pour a little bit of distilled water over celery or over lettuce before I clean it up with a cloth and just get the dirt off it. But if it doesn't have overt dirt on it, I'm usually not worrying about it that much.
Thank you. Um,
Obviously, I think that the problem there, sorry to go back double on that, but the problem isn't so much that the food isn't clean, it's that we don't know who handled it and how clean they were in their technique. And so you'll find almost all the food contamination that we ever hear about actually wasn't food contamination, it was human contamination of the food. So you don't know where, if you don't know where your food's been, if you didn't grow your own zucchini, you didn't grow your own tomatoes, you don't know who did, that's adding an element of risk that we just have to live with.
mhm.
Even then, if I was going to wash it, I'd probably just wash it under the tap.
Thank you. If it seems to be all the questions here. I do have my own off the top of my head, if you don't mind me asking it right now, Dr. Graham.
Kevin, I'm looking at the questions, and Kevin asks us, what is it again?
This actually is just about an article I came across today, and I'm curious to know, since you're growing so much of your own produce as well, um, with some of the soil depletion that's often talked about, do we have to worry about that so much on a fruit and vegetable-based diet, and what can we do to supplement or augment that potential danger?
This is a subject that's dear to my heart, and one that I could talk on for a long time. But the short answer is no. The short answer is that fruit trees, especially trees, bring nutrients from the deep soil up to the surface, into leaves and branches and whatever, and then eventually into the soil itself. Trees actually build the nutrition of the soil and get their nutrients from down deep. If topsoil is depleted in some way, either the amount or the nutrients within it, it really doesn't affect the nutritional value of food that comes off of trees. So fruits and nuts are still pulling from deep down. In terms of vegetables, vegetables are still super high in nutrients compared to the number of calories in them. And most people only eat 3 or 4 or 5% of their calories from vegetables. So I don't find it a worry particularly. Although I do build up the quality of my own soil for my vegetable garden, I don't see buying lettuce from a grocery store as being an issue. We're talking about a very small portion of your total calories consumed, and the rest is coming off of trees that actually are the source of the very nutrients that the soil needs.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer. And then there is one last one from Penny I almost skipped over. What's the 811, what's the 81010 preferred professional way to clean the Vitamix when the standard drop of dish soap falls short.
I just usually, I'm trying to think if I've ever used anything other than just water and occasional scrub brush. I like a long-handled scrub brush. I'll reach down and just scrape the insides a little bit. But for almost everything 80-10-10, all you really ever need is just water. Now, if water doesn't clean the Vitamix really well, what I'll do is I'll fill the Vitamix half full with water and then put the top on, put it on the base, and turn it on with just water. And mixing that water at high speed, it just cleans it like crazy. Now, you know, if you put water in a blender, or certainly in a Vitamix blender, if you put water in a Vitamix blender, turn it on to high speed and walk away, in a few minutes that water will be boiling hot. And so you can actually boil clean the inside of your Vitamix if you're that kind of person that would want to do that. Simply by putting water in the Vitamix, and putting it on high and letting it run for a few minutes. Personally, I just use a brush if I need to, and most of the time, just a rinse with water.
Thank you, Dr. Graham. It is good advice, and I think also some advice is to make sure you clean it quickly after use. It makes it much easier than allowing the banana to stick in
Agreed.
there for a day.
The sooner the better. The sooner the better. It's been a pleasure talking about Culinary Skills Week. I look forward to the upcoming webinars this Saturday. I hope to meet you at food and sport events this summer in Cedar Woolley, Washington, and welcome you in to the food and sport family. Thanks for being here with me. This is Dr. Doug Graham, wishing you all a great day.